Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Best of the Pedalshift project. This episode is being recorded in Portland, Oregon, and I'm actually walking through the Portland International Airport right now. Portland people are really proud of this airport, which is probably another good reason why I thought I would give you that bit of soundscape here. Originally, I was going to be talking about the Podcast Palooza ride. We ended up recording a lot of cool stuff, but nothing that was really super specific to bicycle touring. So I just thought, you know what, why don't we instead do a best of with one of the major contributors, one of the major riders in it, and that's going to be Aaron Flores, who was kind enough to be on the show all the way back in our 00 episodes, 004. So that's going to be our best of interview for this. The Podcast Palooza ride was a lot of fun. It was a great meetup. We decided well over 30 folks. If you're interested in hearing more about that ride, I think that the Sprocket Podcast is going to be putting up much more of the audio where we talked a lot about podcasting generally and bikes in Portland and all of those types of things specifically. Go listen to all of that. I'll probably end up being in a few of the recordings there. So my ride on the Oregon coast was awesome, but it's a little bit too quick of a turnaround to make that be the episode for this week. So we're going to do the best of this week, and we're going to be doing the Oregon coast ride, which was fantastic, in a couple of weeks. Of course, next week, when you tune in, we're going to be doing the wrap-up. So we had some overlapping bicycle tour content from me to you, but this week, Aaron Flores. His connection with bicycle travel and all things Portland as well, which I think was one of the more enjoyable episodes that I ever did, and I think you're going to enjoy this. Without further ado, here we go. Here's Aaron. All right, as promised, this is a crossover episode, and if you have not listened to the Sprocket Podcast episode number 192, you can do that first if you'd like. You don't have to. The interviews, I think, refer to each other. However, if you really care, you want to listen to the Sprocket first. That was the one that we recorded first, but this is an interview with Aaron Flores, who's the co-host of the Sprocket Podcast. Described by his friends as 35 and going nowhere, Aaron is a relative newcomer to Cascadia with only 3 years in Portland under his belt. His formative years were spent in the rural lowlands of southeast Michigan, where he did things like can vegetables, pick apples, climb trees, and eat fried bologna. Fried bologna. He's lived in many different places and enjoyed learning various skills since then. He has many stories about the colorful places and people in his long life and shares these experiences on the Sprocket Podcast. I'm very excited to share this with you. We had a really good time. Enjoy the interview. Thank you for joining me, Aaron. I really appreciate it. We just got done recording the Sprocket Podcast version of the crossover. So yes. Thank you. That was a shit ton of fun, I'm just going to say. So thank you for joining me on the Pedalshift project side of things.
Thank you. Yeah, that ended up being, it was over an hour. I don't know if it was quite an hour and a half. It was getting close though. So
it could be a two-parter.
So there'll be some editing I'll have to do.
I kept saying, you're welcome, Sprocket Podcast listeners. Maybe I should have been saying, I'm sorry, Sprocket Podcast listeners. My bad.
That's great.
It's cool. So anyways, what I wanted to talk to you about is I think that it's really interesting seeing your journey in bike touring because you're relatively new to it. The Big Sur trip, was that your first one that you ever did, or have you done smaller ones?
It was my second major tour. I'll do like weekends when I can.
What was the first? What got you into it? What was the first thing?
So I'm kind of reluctant to admit this, but it was actually kind of Brock and Adele, and seeing them, I had just moved to Portland. I had just gotten to know them and their group of friends. I would see them come back from like a trip on their bikes and like talking about like all of the adventures they had, not even in the camping, but like what they found on the road or, who they met while on the road. And yeah, there was this part of me that was like, dude, I want this.
Yeah. The stories that you get on tour are irreplaceable. It's Americana, or if you're in America touring, but it's where you're at. It's such a slice of life, and I can totally see if you are sort of attracted to that storytelling aspect and all that. I totally get that.
Yeah, and camping. I wasn't a huge camper. I liked it. I was in the Boy Scouts when I was young, and I never got very far with Boy Scouts. Didn't learn a single knot. Well, I learned some knots. I didn't learn much, though.
Have you forgotten all of them like I have?
I still do a 2.5 hitch knot every now and then when I need like a good like slip loop.
I just had to reteach myself a bow line because I have to do it for bear bags.
You have the 6.
That's the one with the rabbit around the tree around.
Comes back down.
That never worked for me.
No.
I don't understand who the rabbit is, and I think that's not a tree. That's a piece of rope. I mean, come on, people.
Yeah, that's so I was never like into like scouting, but I liked camping. I liked hanging out with them and going camping. And so I never advanced at all in rank. I think they finally like gave me the tenderfoot rank just because it was like, okay, you've been here for 3 years. Let's get you moving here, kid. Come on.
Buy the patch. It's $5.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the camping that I really liked. There's something about being in the woods and kind of existing just on your own power, and relying. And I don't want this to sound like, you know, it was all me, but just relying on the group that you're with and just the resources that you have, which at many times are limited. That really attracts me to camping. And then if you can take the vehicle out of it, if you can take the car out of it, because cars are expensive, not just in the realm of gas and getting out there, but in the realm of keeping it up to get out to where you need to go, especially in relation to the bike. And, you know, there's a lot of numbers for that out there. But, taking the car out of the equation and realizing like, oh, and of course I live in Portland where, you know, there's forests and the state park and the state forest and the even the national forest system around here is really well done. So there's a lot of great destinations around me. There was just this I don't know, calling in a way, and this draw towards biking. And I wouldn't just say like it's all because of Brock and Adele, but in major part because of them and the crew that we all were running with at the time. We were all like really into simple living. We're all still into simple living, but really into getting to a destination under our own power versus trying to get there by carpooling or
totally
those means.
There's something about looking at a map also and saying, looking at point A to point B and seeing on a real road map, you know, something that shows real distance and going, I biked that.
Yeah.
There's something cool about that.
There is something really cool about that. And I don't know, like, I don't think it's out of line to say, like, there is a little bit of vanity driven in there where, you know, to be able to bike from one destination to another and meeting up with people who drove there and then, you know, sort of discussing with them and seeing their reaction, like, holy shit, you biked that, you know, or
especially up a big climb. That's the thing. It's like, oh yeah, that took me a day to do and it took you 10 minutes, but yeah, I biked that. I biked that.
Yeah. I did that with my own power.
Yeah.
Sort of a negative example of this is I was coming up Hawthorne, which is, you know,
for those of you not up Portland, that's a pretty major drag here.
It's a major arterial. Yeah. It's, if you ever come to Portland, it's kind of where all the hippie shops are in the southeast.
Right.
In the northeast, it would be Alberta. But anyways, I like to bike that for a number of reasons. I like to bike that because it reminds me that this is still a car-oriented infrastructure. And also it gets me used to driving or riding with traffic. And also in a way, I feel like it's my small part of activism to let people in cars know, like, we're allowed on the roads. We're at least, you know, according to Oregon state law, we have all the same rights as drivers.
That's really interesting. You look at it from an activist perspective. I think that's really that's amazing. I think that's great.
It's the smallest part of activism I can do.
Well, no, leading by example. I mean, that is the first. It's sort of the primary way of being an activist. Even if it's just as one, you're serving a role. You're educating.
Yeah. So I was coming up that this is sort of the negative example, you know, returning to my sort of vanity. But coming up that at one point it becomes one lane.
Suddenly too, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. It merges really quickly right after. So 39th is the major north-south arterial. Hawthorne is it's a fairly major east-west
up
arterial.
till that point at least. Yeah.
So going east, pretty much right after 39th, it merges into one lane, or 2 lanes going each direction.
Right.
But anyway, so I have to merge with traffic, and that tends to, get under some driver's skin. And went a couple blocks, and this car deemed that it was safe to pass me, and it was. If I don't think it's safe for a car to pass me, I'll take up the whole lane. If I'm at a point where there's enough of a shoulder or there isn't many cars parked on the side of the road, I'll move over. I'm not out to like ruin anybody's day or to make anybody late. I'm just getting from point A to point B using the same roads everybody else does.
You were there first.
and yeah, I beat you off the line.
There you go.
But anyways, I was getting passed by this car, and the woman rolls down her window, and she's like, "You're only going 14 miles an hour." And so to her, that's a really small, number. To me, I was like, all right, I'm going 14 miles an hour.
I was going to say, that's awesome.
Like, weighted down under my own power, that's awesome. And so I'm giving her the thumbs up because I'm really happy about this. I don't know if she was very happy with me.
It's all about perspective, isn't it?
Right.
That is awesome. Speaking of your bike, you are the proud owner of a Surly, and it has a name. Which please inform our listeners again what the name of your bike is.
This is the Red Hare Among Horses,
which is a reference to a work of literature, if I recall.
Yes. So Chinese romantic fiction. Oh gosh, I should know this already. I've read the Wikipedia entry so many times, but
regardless, you have a cool name for your bike, and it's literally is that an actual word?
Sure.
It has a literary base to it.
Basis. Yeah. So the quote I pulled it from was, so there's the red hare it's an actual horse, but it's also fictionalized in these stories. Was written by this general Liu Bu, and an actual general who's also fictionalized in these stories. And then there was the famous saying Liu Bu among men, saying he's the greatest among men. The red hare among horses, the greatest among horses. And so I just pulled that last half and said, that's the name of my bike. And of course, you have to say the whole thing.
It has to be the whole thing. Yeah, yes. I like that. It's like, I think there's a group of people who love naming their bikes, and a group of people who would never consider it. And it's funny because I have basically 2 bikes, and I have one with a name and one without. So I sort of straddle it. Yeah.
Now,
the one I rode here.
My question to you is, like, do you have a different relationship with one versus the other?
Let me tell you, so the Goblin, or the Green Goblin, is my West Coast bike. But when I got here, I realized that my bike back home, the Nameless bike, is sort of the better of the 2 bikes. It's newer. It's a little more built up as a touring bike. And the Goblin was sort of, I'm trying to save some bucks by having a bike out here because I start tours out here often. And I got it from the bike collective up in Alberta, whose name is
the CCC.
CCC, yeah,
yeah, okay.
Yeah, who guests on your podcast, I believe, recently.
Yeah, Michael Teta. Hopefully, he'll be on in August.
Oh, that's fantastic!
Yeah.
Good group, and they gave me a great bike. It's been in my brother's garage for a few months, and the rear wheel, all the spokes somehow just burst on it.
Really?
And none of us can figure out just all around it. So I got to get a new rear wheel on it, and it was sort of like it justified 100%, obviously, bringing the Nameless bike with me. But now I'm sort of like, I'm sad because I felt like I do have a little more of a personal relationship with that bike. So, but I'll get it. I'll get the Goblin back up and going. And I thought that maybe on this trip there will be a name for this bike.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. So I named my last bike, again, a sentence versus just a one word name. It was a bicycle called Panic. And that was,
love that. That is great.
That was due to, a ride I took, along the historic Columbia Highway. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Coming down from Vista Point, it's really windy. It's really steep.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it now. I didn't the first time I rode it though. I was really panicky. And,
bike called Panic.
And I felt anyways like the bike was really shaky. So that's how it earned that name. But it wasn't named for a good long while until that.
That's amazing.
So yeah, sometimes these names are are just brought out in the adventure.
And I think that's cool. It's interesting because for that one, it required a ride of daring and death-defying to give it its name.
Well, and the difference between the two is a bike called Panic, which is, no longer around, at least for me, anyways. Hopefully someone's enjoying it.
If you follow Aaron at all, unfortunately, that was pilfered by some nameless person who we hope has a very nice day.
Yeah, no, in the beginning, all I wanted was my bike back, and I still really would love to see it back, but I really hope whoever has it is using it to its full potential.
Yeah.
That thing wasn't necessarily designed to be a touring bike, but it became a touring bike.
Well, and whenever you've got stories behind it, the bike that I did my first tour on was stolen, and all of the stories that, the first time I went up Leggett Hill on the Pacific Coast and all that, and survived that in this deluge of a rainstorm. To me, that bike survived that with me.
Yeah,
and that bike is somewhere else. It chopped up in one piece. I don't know, but it is interesting.
Yeah, But anyways, just really hope someone's enjoying that. I was going somewhere with that though.
Probably because I interviewed you, or I interrupted you because I'm a terrible.
No, it's all right. That happens. Oh yeah, so that one, like the relationship I have with the two bikes, or had with the two bikes, that one earned its name as I was. This is really weird and existential, I realize, but bear with me.
Naming
listeners.
your bike is an existential process. It's totally cool.
It is like that happened like during an adventure.
Yep.
It was a bike that I bought. It was a bike that like somebody else had ridden. It was a Craigslist bike. It was a great bike. It was one that I modded out. The Red Hare Among Horses, is a bike I built up myself.
Yeah.
So the naming, in a way, it's kind of like I'm laughing at myself here as I bring out this analogy. It's kind of like, having this kid, and like, I'm naming my kid right away. As soon as it was built, like I had the name chosen already, I don't know. Parents, you're going to like write in and be like, that is not how that goes.
That's not how it works.
That's not how it works. Well, guess what? I'm not a parent, and there's reasons why. And this is maybe one.
We all walk our
reason.
own path. Let's talk about this current bike, because it is a Surly, and I often joke that people who own Surleys are a part of a mad cult, because Surly people love their Surleys.
I say the same thing about Rivendell owners.
That's true too. Fair enough. So I guess my first question is, do you agree that Surly people are sort of cultish about it? And what is it about Surly as a company that they make such great touring bikes? I mean, I say this with all great love and positivity, of course,
No, I agree. There is something. Okay, so
long haul truckers in particular.
My first car, I was fortunate enough. My first car was this 73 Mercedes 280. So it's this really old kind of German taxi cab looking car. And to this day, anytime I see somebody driving that, it's like we make eye contact and we kind of like nod at each other. We know each other. It's kind of like that with Surly's. And I'm sure like anybody who, sort of subscribes to this kind of branding, for lack of a better term, like, Surly owners, they kind of have that unity with each other. Other long haul truckers or even disc truckers, when we run into each other, we're kind of like, hey, what's up? What's up?
How'd you mod your out?
Yeah. Right. No, this actually happened not too long ago. Yeah. I just pulled into this coffee shop up on Division, another just local road around here. And this guy was coming out as I was coming in. And I go to lock up my bike, and he's unlocking his, and we make eye contact, and we look at each other's bikes, and we're like, long haul trucker, yeah. And then we just talked about like what we've done with it. Yeah. How did you mod out your bike? How did you mod out your bike? And
it's interesting because with Surly, certain things don't come standard. You don't just buy a Surly and it's got everything on it. So you have to add things like,
and maybe that's part of it.
Maybe
that's part of the cult of the branding, is that Surly's definitely are made to be modded.
Yeah, you start with the frame, and then you add these other pieces to it, and no two Surleys are really alike in that sense. Unlike a lot of other touring bikes where you're going to buy it straight from a shop and it's going to be like that.
Yeah, I mentioned in one of our episodes, I don't know how long ago, but I mentioned like I've kind of become a Surly snob, and and even a snob among surly snobs, in that if I see somebody with like a surly that's stock, just comes right out of the box, as Surly sells it or sets it up on their site, kind of in a way looking down on them. This is so bad of me to admit, kind of looking down on them and be like,
you're entry level.
You didn't do anything to that. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Well, maybe they're building themselves up to
right.
it. Yeah, right.
You're
yeah.
right. But that's
they're saving up for their Brooks saddle, and they're
my reluctant admission is, and this is how I'm becoming a better person, is by admitting these flaws. Right.
It's funny, and I'm glad that you've been candid about this, because I my buddy MJ, who I've talked about and written about a lot, he's got a long haul trucker, and he and I both got into touring at about the same time. He got a long haul trucker, and I got an REI's brand of touring bike called the Novara Safari.
And what did I do right when I saw it?
You checked it out and you're like, oh, that looks like an ogre.
Yep. I was like, oh, that's an ogre. Yeah.
It is. And it's got a similar thing. And they spec out really similarly to long haul truckers, and they're a little bit cheaper. And because I wasn't as he was like, I am full in, I'm getting this long haul trucker, and I'm getting the Brooks saddle, and I'm doing all this. And I'm like, I'm going to try this out with this bike first, But it's interesting. I don't see my bike very often, but when I do, I have the exact same experience, but I just don't see it as often. But there's lots more long haul truckers that you'll see out on tour, so it's kind of funny. And they're great bikes. They're just great bikes. If you're listening and ever you're kind of thinking, what's sort of the bike that I should aspire to, because you don't need these bikes to go touring. You talked about your first bike.
My first bike was a commuter bike.
I used a 26-inch mountain bike with suspension, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
That I threw a rack on. That's what I did, which is the worst idea in the world. But it worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah. Who is it? Well, Tom Allen, he just did this whole, I can't remember the name for it, but just this free tour where he would go from place to place, where he's at in England, basically trading work for a place to stay and for food. And it was just this simple mountain bike. Yeah, just this 26-inch whatever. I don't think it was suspension though. And then just some really cheap bags that he put that he somehow modded so that they would sit on a rack.
The weekend after my flood trip, which we talk about the flood trip, and if you've read Pedalshift, of course, you've seen the video. I went out again, and I ran into a guy from Scotland who had, maybe a notch above a Walmart bike, like a $200 kind of flat bar thing. He's hanging garbage bags off of it. He's been touring the world on that thing. He says he's replaced a couple of tires and he's been fine. It's amazing. I don't recommend getting an inexpensive bike because components tend to go out quickly.
Right.
But you don't have to spend a lot of money on a bike. But when you do notice a difference. On your bike is a gorgeous bike. My bike has got some nice components to it. When you really decide to get into it, that's the right investment.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something you work into, I think. I mentioned, when I first got this bike, my first bike, it was a commuter bike. I did 50 miles on it. It was fine, but I knew I wanted to get drop bars. It came with flat bars. And so then modded out to drop bars. And as I got money and as other parts wore out, I slowly upgraded to like better brakes and
better gearing ratios, maybe.
Different. It was a more road oriented gearing that I put on there versus the I don't know what was on there originally. It was a different gearing ratio, and it was never, I'm not gonna ride this bike until it's perfect. Like, I'm gonna ride this bike until I can't ride this bike.
Right. It's like when the old school computers where you swap out RAM and maybe add a hard drive to it. That's sort of how biking is now. Now it's sort of like once you get to the point where you were with your new bike, where it's like, okay, I can build this from scratch and I know exactly what I liked from all previous incarnations of my bikes and I know exactly what I want. And you were able to do that.
Yeah, that's a great parallel. My first computer was just this Hewlett Packard piece of junk, that I learned on. I learned how to switch things out. And so then when I graduated college, got some graduation money around, and with all of that money, just bought top of the line components and just put my own computer together again, knowing what I want, knowing what I could use and what I could need, as opposed to trying to go with just everything great out of the box, putting it together as I could get it.
Yeah.
You know?
And the one thing I always tell people is I don't know everything by any stretch of the imagination, but what I've learned is you don't have to know everything, but once you start to get that knowledge, it's always helpful for you. So you don't have to be a bike mechanic to be able to do this. And you don't have to understand this stuff. You know, you can take your bike to the shop for everything to get it done if you need to. But, you know, over time, you'll start to want to understand how a derailleur works and how, you know, keeping your chain clean is a good thing and all those other types of things.
Well, and if you're doing like any touring, even if it's just weekends, it's good to know some basic maintenance stuff. Just
and emergency
survive,
stuff.
Yeah, just to survive on the road sometimes.
I put up a few resources on the website that I thought were really helpful for me, and they've come in handy. It's been the difference between me basically being stranded and not. And those are the types of things that can really make or break a weekend. You know, it's just sort of like, okay, well, I can get to the next town with a bike shop to replace this wheel. But in the meantime, you know, I can put on this, you know, Kevlar spoke to stop it from, you know, tacoing out on me. You know? It's those types of things that can be really helpful. All right. I got more questions for you.
All right.
That's a good transition to ask more questions. So I'm going to be going to Big Sur for the first time. And I know that was one of your
that was my
right?
second biggest tour. My first biggest tour
Crater Lake, wasn't
Crater Lake. Yeah. And so with my work and with my lifestyle or whatever, I don't get out as much as, you know, some of the other tourists, or, you know, like Brock and Adele, for example, who are out for the entire summer.
Right. They have a job situation. We talked about this with Brock in the first episode, or second episode.
Fortunate enough that they're able to do that, and I'm jealous. I am grateful for their adventures so that I can live vicariously through them. But yeah, so I don't get as many long tours as I would love to, or as other people would. But yeah, so all that to say, Big Sur was my second biggest tour.
How was Big Sur for you? I mean, I'm asking selfishly because I've driven it before.
Okay.
But I've never biked it, so I'm curious what your thoughts are on Big Sur. If you're not familiar with California, Big Sur is probably one of the most beautiful parts of the California coastline, and it's a major part of the California section of the Pacific Bike Tour route.
Yes.
And you've ridden it, and I'm curious what your thoughts were about it.
So leading up to it, we camped out at Half Moon Bay.
Gorgeous
and I'm mentioning this first because in order to get to Half Moon Bay, you have to do this stretch called the Devil's Slide. Mm-hmm. And I just kept reading about the Devil's Slide and how treacherous it is and how unbike friendly it is. And getting up to, like, it's really steep, and then it just drops down into Half Moon Bay. Getting up to that drop, it is pretty nerve-wracking. There isn't much of a shoulder. You have to get out into the lane, and it's just a 2-lane highway at that point. And so there's a bit of traffic next to you, sometimes like right directly behind you.
Closer than the 3 feet that California law is technically affording you.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a little bit of that, but once you get up to that drop, it becomes a 4-lane highway separated. Mm-hmm. So, and then you go through this tunnel. And it's just amazing. So we have this lane, Brock, Adele, and myself, have this lane all to ourselves, and we're on like our hardest gears, and we're just spinning. Mm-hmm. At one point, it's just even too tough for us to spin on those gears. And just, we get through that tunnel, and we're screaming, and we're having such a great time. And we get to Half Moon Bay, and we're like, we can conquer the world. You just feel like on top of everything. And Half Moon Bay, yeah, it's beautiful.
It's one of my favorite parts of the California coastline. Mm-hmm. It's gorgeous.
Getting into Big Sur, I'm constantly confronted by how beautiful and how awe-inspiring all the landscape is, and how nerve-wracking it is to ride next to this traffic, and holy shit, there's no shoulder, and it's just a cliff. Yeah. And like, oh my gosh, if I get bumped on the right in just the right way, I'm going to go right over this railing and down
and
several
that's
feet.
A long way.
Yeah, that's a long drop. I loved it regardless of that. I loved it. In a way, maybe because of that, because I was just constantly bombarded by these these conflicting signals in my brain of like, shit, you gotta survive. Shit, that's really awesome.
Wow, that's very pretty. Holy hell, that's a car.
Yeah.
Do you use a rear view mirror at all?
I do not. I would suggest it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. I resisted it for a while because the one that I was using was the wrong one for me.
Okay.
I used one of those helmet ones with the little circle that's sort of like right off your left
Just
side of your face.
Just in your peripheral right there?
I could never make it work.
Okay.
And I found it to be more distracting than anything else. So then I moved to the handlebar one. The one that I thought would be distracting, would be horrible, ends up being the great one for me.
Okay.
And it gives you so much more confidence knowing that you can peek down and look and know what's exactly over your shoulder and roughly how far back just based on the experience that you have. And I think that in these shoulderless sections of these types of bike tours, that it can give you a little bit more confidence to know, hey, I actually know that I can get out into the lane right now. I can take the lane and not have to worry about it. And I can do that. And I know when the car is coming and I know when I need to kind of, signal over. It gives you more confidence to be able to do that. And then I can use hand signals to really let cars know they're more confident about me. They know I'm not going to be going all over the place. It's great.
Yeah. Chris Delaney, who we interviewed, rides, well, him and his family are back in Portland now, but was riding in Wyoming at the time of the interview and says exactly that same thing about having a mirror and how it's a great way not just to communicate, but also to connect with drivers on the road. And it's alleviated a lot of tension between drivers and him. Here in the city, I don't necessarily think it's necessary. I realize that was just a redundant statement. But on tour, I always consider it. And then there's just that part of me that's like, I'll be all right.
It's one of those things that once I've started using one, I use it in the city now too. When I look down and don't have it, I sort of, oh darn.
Everybody I know who's used a mirror and has actually gotten used to the mirror has endorsed the mirror.
And I never thought I'd be that guy.
Yeah.
Because it's exactly the same mindset that I don't need it. I can look over my shoulder.
I'll be all right.
Yeah. I'm safe. I'll do that. I think it's just that extra bit of information. More information is always better, right?
Yes.
And that's how I've always felt about it since I've started
My
using
mantra
it.
ever since I was a little kid was no information is bad information.
Exactly.
And you can take that both ways.
I wanted to share something. A Pedalshift and Sprocket Podcast listener. So I'm assuming that he's listening to this. And unfortunately, I'm sorry, I did not write your name down, but thank you for emailing. Asked if I would be as crazy as you and Brock because the world needs a little more crazy. I have a funny feeling. I loved it. I have a funny feeling that you'd agree with that. And
I think the world needs a lot more crazy.
Why do you think the world needs irrationality like that? What's positive? Because I think I agree with that too. Yeah.
First of all, I'm not crazy. Everybody else is. I don't necessarily think I'm all that nuts as far as like touring. Again, like I'm just getting started. I'm just getting to the tip of the iceberg of crazy. But I think there just needs to be a lot more people. And crazy, it's abstract. It could mean a lot of different things. But in general, I think we could use a lot more people looking at the status quo and not necessarily rejecting it outright, but really looking at it and going, is this working? Is driving my giant ass RV, from one place to another, is that working? If it's not, what can we do to make it work? If it is working, what is it about it that makes it work? And how do we continue to make it work? Let's make that a little bit bigger. Is the highway system working? I mean, as far as mobilizing and getting from point A to point B as fast as possible, possibly. But is that our goal? Is that my goal as a human being, to just get from point A to point B as quickly as possible without any interaction? So I think the world needs a lot more crazy. I think the world needs a lot more people to just kind of look at the way we do things and not rejecting it outright, but at least looking at it critically and saying, is this working?
That's totally well said. wanted to ask you that question since the moment that came in, because I was sort of like, I'm wondering what those guys think about that. So tell me, just to sort of wrap things up a little bit, you've been taking over the Sprocket Podcast,
yes,
basically in total while Brock's been gone, and we just had a great, like we said at the top of the show here, we had a fun time doing the show. How's it been for you, and during this piece, and what do you see? You've been doing this for a while now. What do you see the future of the show? I asked Brock the same question. I'm curious what you think.
Yeah,
if it disagrees, there could be problems.
Right. And I'll be honest, I haven't listened to that episode yet.
Well, don't listen to the part.
Brock has been kind of at the helm for a real long time, and I'm willing to. I'll just say this for the record. I'm willing to follow him to the ends of the earth. As far as the Sprocket and what his vision is for the future, I think whatever he thinks of, I'd be willing to follow it. My vision for the future of the Sprocket Podcast would be to just, again, continually bring that viewpoint of is the status quo working, I know there's a lot of what we do that maybe could be considered, un-American or antisocial. And we talked in our version, in the Sprocket version of the episode, about discourse and dissent being good things, and this was in relation to that whole Washington, that whole
Wait,
Washington
on my podcast,
Post
I can be
episode.
more angry at him,
right? Okay.
Actually, we should give it some context just in case somebody listens to the other show. This was an editorial, not an editorial, a columnist who wrote a pretty dumb column, quite frankly,
divisive at the very
least. And I can honor the fact that he has an opinion that is different from mine. However, there were portions of this that I thought he was really reckless in almost, if not completely, advocating violence against people on bikes, and that just frankly pisses me off.
Right.
I think it's unprofessional.
It's dangerous, even if it's hyperbolic.
Exactly.
It's dangerous because the wrong person could take that.
Yeah.
Oh, this just reminded me. The Fisher King. I don't know if you know that movie.
With the great Jeff Bridges.
Yes. Yeah. Terry Gilliam directed that. One of my favorite directors. In that movie, Jeff Bridges is this shock talk DJ, and he mentions, maybe someone needs to go in and like gun down the rich or whatever. And, this guy who is unhinged takes that as an actual call to action, which was not. He was being hyperbolic.
Right.
Again, that's a fear of mine.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Hopefully someone out there is not going to take a broomstick to my bike when I'm back in DC.
But the illustration was, unbridled hyperbole can be dangerous.
Yeah. And I also don't think it's professional. I mean, I think if you're doing it in an artistic way, that's different. I mean, we've seen that in all sorts of different types of music and things like that. But in this context, I'm sort of ticked at the Post, because I respect what the Post has done over the years. I mean, I think it's
right.
I think a lot of journalism.
I think you called it one of the great American newspapers. Yes,
it was disappointing, and as somebody who is on a bike more than in a car in DC, it was a disappointing opinion piece. Even though, like I said, it's fine for you to have that opinion. I can disagree with you. Just don't advocate someone hurt me on a bike. Please, thank you. Please and thank you, as my great aunt would say.
Yeah. So all that to say, continually bringing a voice, if not dissent, at least trying to open the eyes to people to a different way of living, a different way of viewing life. Anyways.
Gotcha. Aaron, how can we follow you on the internets if we were to follow you on the internets?
You cannot. Ha
He says no to following. Although you can listen to Aaron on the Sprocket Podcast.
You can listen to me on the podcast, and I'm currently at the helm, like Sulu was.
Like Sulu, who we've learned is a captain, or was a captain, or could be a captain.
Had his own ship in Star Trek V.
I believe the Reliance, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
which was an Excelsior class ship. Nerd for the win.
Nerd for the win.
No, yeah. So, and I'll be posting to the Sprocket's Twitter feed for while Brock is gone, and maybe. I mean, I've got access, so I could do it even when he's back.
Awesome. But, can pirate the Sprocket at Sprocket Podcast on Twitter, right?
I don't have a Twitter feed, but the Red Hair Among Horses has a Twitter account. I
love that your bike has a Twitter account.
Yes, she'll tweet every now and then. She talked about how Bike Scout is now on, and she's calling out for teammates.
And what is her Twitter feed so that I can immediately follow it?
Yeah,
I assume it's her name, right?
It is. It's Red Hair Among Horses, but it wouldn't.
It's probably doesn't fit.
Let
that's why I wanted to
fit that.
want to make sure that we can get it into the show notes as well.
At RDHAREAMNGHRSES. Erd Hair Among Horses.
So, I'd go to pedalshift.net and check that out.
Yeah,
So,
I'll post it.
Aaron, thank you so much for being a part of the show. I really appreciate it. And if you did not yet listen to the Sprocket Podcast number 192, that is the version where we talk about all sorts of things, including, oh man, we went off on...
Did we get to the moon landing conspiracy?
I think we stopped short of that. So if you want to hear a little bit...
pretty much everything else.
Yeah, if you want to hear about a few things other than bike touring, go check that out at thesprocketpodcast.com.
Tim, thanks for having me.
Thank you.